There will come a time when you hit a point of no return. We have already surpassed that moment. The United States national debt doubles that of every country on the face of this planet. A population of 375 million people holds the world's largest debt of $34 trillion. Revised, it's actually $36.85 trillion. What happens when we will have to start prioritizing survival over our wants? Wants and needs are not the same thing, although you have been programmed to believe there is no difference. In the second month, on the 17th day in 1982, Mexico recognized they were running out of money. By the end of the week, they would be broke. They allowed the peso to correct itself, where it fell 40% compared to the US dollar. 7 months later, in August of 1982, Mexico's financial crisis came to a full head when their finance minister announced that the country will be unable to pay its debt to the United States of $80 billion. Not long after, the Secretary of Finance was able to secure loans from 27 big banks that restructured Mexico's loans to favor them, saving Mexico from an economic disaster. How did they find themselves in this crisis? Well, it's simple. They favored the wealthy, the rich, over the middle class, something that the United States is doing, which in turn caused a wage disparity. On top of that, they were importing far less than they were exporting, and then you had the price of gas falling sharply, reducing Mexico's income. Then the U.S. interest rates rose to historical highs between 78 and 82, which increased the cost of external funding for Mexico from the United States. And once the Mexican peso was devalued, exports became cheaper, encouraging more and more exports while discouraging imports. Welcome to the second season of Fetch Productions. Sluts, pedophiles, rebels, and some light blue employees, all for hire. This season, we're talking about how propaganda is used to kill off the middle class in the United States for its wealthiest people. And you guys voted to make America great again for the seventh time. Interesting. Everyone's back at war. A cold one, too. Lord knows we don't want a hot one. So let me take you back to the 80s. Make America great again. Ronald was the one who made that slogan popular. He said it first. Everybody else is just a copycat. Let's start with 1987. The Lakers had just beat the Boston Celtics in the 1987 NBA Finals. And the next day, when you turned on the TV, all you saw was this white man in his military outfit. You couldn't turn on the television and not see Oliver North testifying in front of Congress. This shit went on for about 2 years, and it was all over the Iran-Contra scandal. And for many of you who weren't born, or those of you who were around but didn't understand what that was, Iran was an ally of the United States, a friend. Turns out The enemy of my friend is not my enemy. Thus said the United States. Our allies had went to war with their enemy. And then we turned around and sold the enemy the same weapons we sold our friends, just so we could pay for some guerrillas in Colombia to overthrow their government. Now, why would we want to do that? Turns out the commies were a little too close to the United States and South America. So we got in bed with the world's largest cocaine dealer, Pablo Escobar. Ronald Reagan decided to start slinging crack cocaine in black neighborhoods using young black men, some of them teenagers, to raise money for the Colombian guerrillas. When I think back to all the money that was raised and all the lives that were lost, it didn't make much sense as to why the U.S. government would do such a thing. The Colombian guerrillas didn't even overthrow their government. To make matters worse, black people didn't use cocaine unless they went to a disco in the 70s or they were in the entertainment business, and they certainly didn't sell cocaine. That was a non black thing. They didn't buy it because it was too expensive. $100 a gram they could not afford. I mean, what do you expect? A welfare queen to spend that kind of money? Note, welfare queen was a derogatory phrase used towards black women in the 80s. During checkout at the grocery, they would notice the black woman's cart was filled all the way to the tippy top. And as she walked out of the store and went to her car to load up her vehicle, they noticed she drove a Cadillac. Ain't that something? As if you cannot fall on bad times after you've lost your job, or the family business just wasn't doing well. Jealousy can lead to propaganda, you know? Selling, using cocaine wasn't our thing until Make America Great Again made it our thing. Shout out to you Republicans. Don't you know there were teenagers in the 80s who were multimillionaires because they were selling crack cocaine? You'll never guess what Ronald Reagan did after that. He was so successful in creating multimillionaires selling dope. You wouldn't believe what Ronald Reagan introduced to the hard-working Americans in the Appalachian states. He turned to heroin. And look who he has selling it to you. Wasn't a drug dealer. It was your doctors. Wrapped it up in a little white pill and called it opioids. As your body grew accustomed to the dosage, the pain relief wore off. And the pain started getting greater and greater, so you had to go back to your doctor and ask him for a different kind of pill or anything to make the pain stop. So your doctor did what the pharmaceutical companies told him to do, which was to raise your dosage. So you got higher and higher until you wound up on the streets shooting up heroin. Thanks to the Democrats who voted for Ronald Reagan, he was able to cut regulations for the pharmaceutical companies. Must have been your morals and values. Strange how that came to bite you in your ass. Said it wouldn't be right if it wasn't black or white. Yeah, Ronald Reagan had your doctor prescribe you heroin. And even to this day, people are getting addicted to that shit. Maybe that's how the Republican Party knew about death panels. If you cut the pharmaceutical regulations, you can create death panels. Does anyone understand the war on drugs yet? What a ridiculous notion. You supply us with the dope, and then you say you're going to have a war on it. Shut the fuck up. but thanks for teaching poor black people how to start and run an efficient business. The crazy thing is, the people who benefit from the war on drugs are the Mexican cartels in Mexico. They notice how much the U.S. citizens love to get high. I mean, we just got to get high, baby. Whether it's cocaine or marijuana or whatever it is they're importing, we need it for whatever reason. Suppose that's why they want to build that wall. Then again, Ronald Reagan handed out amnesty to immigrants. What a tangled web we weave. Reaganomics, like most things, has pros and cons, or in some cases, it's a double-edged sword. So let's start with the pros. Pros. He reduced inflation significantly. He cut individual and corporate taxes. He used deregulation to encourage a more open and free market. And he decreased investment taxes, which allowed more of the common folk to invest in the stock market. He increased the GDP. He lowered the unemployment rate. He got us out of stagflation. He slowed the growth of spending on social programs. He increased spending on the military. And he only cared about the supply side of supply and demand. But there's a flip side to this voodoo trickle-down economics. Cons. When you're only concerned about the supply side of supply and demand, you're only concerned about the money coming in. And an excess growth of supply will lead to inflation. That's why at the end of his presidency, inflation was the same as it was in 1980, which caused a decline in wages and an increase in income inequality. The rate of the poverty at the end of Reagan's term was the same as it was in the beginning. In 8 years, he doubled the deficit. He doubled the debt. He paid attention to the wishes of the wealthy. He could care less about the middle class and the poor when he decided to gut the spending for Social Security and strip welfare. That climbing gap between rich and poor, it increased. The wage gap between blacks and whites from 1950 to 1980, it grew closer together. Once Ronald Reagan became president, it reversed itself. He showed the poor and middle class what he actually thought of you. To hell with the poor. Pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. I suppose cutting social programs that benefit the people is considered motivation. Not sure how, but hey, I guess you want to make as much money as you possibly can because you don't want to rely on a safety net provided by the government just in case you lose your job or the economy crashes. Lord knows, you wouldn't want to use food stamps or EBT cards. Or, we fall into a pandemic and, you just gotta get a welfare check from the Republicans. But they'll call it stimulus to benefit the economy. As a matter of fact, why is it that every Republican president sends out a welfare check to every citizen in the United States whenever their economy isn't doing well. George W. Bush did it. He gave everybody $1,200 to stimulate his economy. Donald Trump did it to stimulate the economy when you were just sitting in the house because of a pandemic. Herbert Hoover did it to stimulate the economy. How did that work out for you? Republicans are always passing out welfare checks to the wealthy, to the poor, to stimulate their economy. And somehow, no one who's conservative or no one in the Republican Party has a problem taking those welfare checks. If you took a PPP loan, a loan that you don't have to pay back, you took a welfare check. You're a welfare queen. Look what kind of cars they're driving. Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Mercedes-Benzes, Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, expensive cars. But they're collecting welfare. Oh, I'm sorry. PPP loans. If something is a loan, you have to pay it back, and usually it's with interest. Not these folks. They got it for free. They got it for free. And the next person to become president, Joe Biden, he has to deal with the effects of that. So he goes along and he starts passing out welfare checks, stimulus, to stimulate the economy. If you honestly pay attention to Republicans and their administration, when they're in office, everything is going well. When they leave office, we get our asses whooped. And then they want to say, the Democrats are killing the economy. When I look back on the Reagan administration, I noticed how it started is how it ended. And that's usually how it goes for Republican administrations that want to make America great again. How it ends is usually how it began, except for the W. Bush administration. Next time on Sluts, Pedophiles, Rebels, and some light blue employees. Obama cared, but you didn't. This episode was recorded by me, edited by me, produced by me. Who am I? Fetch Productions. Make sure you listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music.